Coach Howard, we appreciate you coming in today, man. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, good to be here. Happy to do it.
And you got a great baseball name there. I'm sure you've never heard that in the baseball circles before.
Yeah. There was a Ryan Howard that played for the Phillies. He's got a lot more money than I do now, but
yeah,
good baseball.
He's on The Office too. I remember that episode where Jim went out to Philadelphia and got to meet Ryan Howard. So it was pretty cool. So
baseball's lineage stems from cricket, school ball, and rounders. Modern rules develop in Cooperstown, New York, with Alexander Cartwright's book, Baseball. The first professional team is established before the National League forms amidst a gambling and liquor scandal. Lee Richmond pitches the first ever perfect game. The American League forms, and 2 years later, the winners of each league play in the first World Series. Fans sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" during the dead ball era, and Harold Arlen calls the first radio broadcast. The All-American Girls Professional Baseball League forms at the height of World War II. Jackie Robinson becomes the first black professional player, and the American League introduces the designated hitter. Players strike, and for the first time in MLB history, the World Series is canceled. Baseball honors Jackie Robinson by universally retiring number 42 forever.
How would you describe the MLB, the history of the MLB to this country, to sports, to all of that?
Yeah, I think it's America's pastime. You go back to 1920s, 1930s. I think it was America's escape from a lot of wars early on in that century, and it's crazy how much it's evolved over the years. I think that if your class or anybody would look back at what the baseball players looked like, 1920s, 1930s, they looked like your average human being walking down the street. And nowadays, with the strength and conditioning and the nutrition and everything that's come along with athletes, these guys are monsters.
Other than that, here's the entire history of Major League Baseball. In 1839, a 20-year-old future Union General, Abner Doubleday, created a primitive version of baseball in Cooperstown, New York. Except that's actually a myth. Baseball actually has its origins in England in the 18th century. The first known mention of baseball in history was in a 1744 book by John Newbery called A Pretty Little Pocketbook. Baseball first appeared in a dictionary in 1768, being defined as a rural game in which a person striking the ball must run to his base or goal. The first written reference to baseball in the United States was by Princeton student John Ray Smith, who wrote a very old-timey sentence about the game. But it's clear that baseball has been around for a lot longer than is widely believed. The rules of this version of the game were very primitive, but definitely recognizable. The American origin myth originated because Americans refused to accept that their national sport was actually of English origin, because this was the 19th century and Americans weren't too fond of the British because of some fairly recent events. Nevertheless, the most widely accepted birthplace of baseball is Cooperstown, where the Baseball Hall of Fame is today. Major League Baseball was established in 1869 in Cincinnati, Ohio. The founding of MLB is marked by the creation of the Cincinnati Red Stockings, the first ever professional baseball team. In 1876, the National League was founded by William Hulbert and Albert Goodwill Spaulding in Manhattan. In 1901, the American League was founded by Van Johnson. Also in 1901 was the first relocation of a franchise that's still around today. The Milwaukee Brewers moved to St. Louis and became the Browns after just one season in Milwaukee. In 1903, the first World Series was played between the Boston Americans and the Pittsburgh Pirates, with Boston coming out on top as the first World Series champions. The Americans would later be known as the Red Sox. In 1908, the BBWAA was founded to help improve working conditions for sports writers. In 1911, the first MVP award, known as the Chalmers Award, was awarded to Detroit's Ty Cobb and Chicago's Frank Schultz. In 1913, the Grapefruit League was established by the Chicago Cubs and the Cleveland Indians. This was an early version of the league that isn't really similar to what we have today. It was mostly just a few exhibition games and a lot of training. In 1921, an MLB game was broadcast on the radio for the first time. The game was played between the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Philadelphia Phillies. In 1933, the first MLB All-Star game was played at Comiskey Park in Chicago. In 1934, Major League Baseball standardized all baseballs across the league. All games were now to be played with 108 double-stitch baseballs. In 1935, the first night game was played in Cincinnati between the Reds and the Phillies. In 1939, the first Hall of Fame class was inducted into Cooperstown, including Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, Honus Wagner, Christy Mathewson, and Walter Johnson. Easily one of, if not the best Hall of Fame classes of all time. Also in 1939, the first ever televised Major League Baseball game was played between the Cincinnati Red Sox and the Brooklyn Dodgers in Brooklyn.
A lot of the greats, Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, their careers were cut short, or they were having to stop their careers to go fight in wars and come back. So throughout the years with the statistics, you start looking at what some of these guys had to go through early on, and before there were planes and taking buses all across the country, playing 162 games a year. It's tough on the body, and these players nowadays have it easier as far as the travel goes than those back then.
As you probably know, Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier and was awarded the first ever Rookie of the Year award. Larry Doby also made his debut in 1947, breaking the American League color barrier. Also in 1947, the Cactus League was founded by Indians owner Bill Veeck, who convinced the New York Giants to also do their spring training in Arizona. One of the reasons for its creation was in preparation for the breaking of the color barrier. Bill Veeck was planning on signing Larry Doby and other Negro League players, but he realized that Florida would not be receptive to this. So he decided to have his team train in Tucson, and from there the Cactus League grew. In 1949, the Rookie of the Year award was given to one player in each league for the first time. It was awarded to St. Louis's Roy Sievers and Brooklyn's Don Newcomb. In 1953, the Boston Braves moved to Milwaukee, keeping their name and becoming the Milwaukee Braves. This was the first franchise relocation in over 50 years. In 1954, the Browns joined the Braves and moved to Baltimore, and they became the Orioles. In 1955, the Athletics moved from Philadelphia to Kansas City, keeping their name as the Kansas City Athletics. Also in 1955, Brooklyn Dodgers pitcher Johnny Podres, but he won the first ever World Series MVP award. In 1956, the first Cy Young Award was awarded to Don Newcomb. In 1957, the Gold Glove Award was given to the best 18 fielders at their positions for the first time. In 1958, the Dodgers moved to Los Angeles and the Giants moved to San Francisco. The Washington Senators moved to Minnesota and became the Twins. In the same year, the Los Angeles Angels and a new version of the Washington Senators were added to the American League, bringing the total to 10 American League teams and 8 National League teams. Because of these two new teams, the American League schedule was expanded from 154 games to 162 games. In 1962, the National League saw its first expansion. The New York Mets and the Houston Colt 45s were brought into the league, evening out the two leagues at 10 each. The National League also expanded their schedule to 162 games as a result. Also in 1962, Dodgers shortstop Maury Wills won the first ever All-Star Game MVP award. In 1964, Masanori Murakami became the first Japanese-born Major League Baseball player, making his debut on September 1st with the San Francisco Giants.
It's an interesting thing because, football is certainly the most popular sport from a rating standpoint. Basketball is up there as well. And they're saying possibly in 10 years, maybe even the Major League Soccer League will pass baseball to some degree in ratings and fanfare and all that stuff. What happened? Like, what is it about baseball that maybe just hasn't maybe kept up with modern times, or just isn't kind of getting the cultural zeitgeist that some of these other sports are getting?
Well, it's a slower paced game. I think that's the number one thing. And I think the game has gotten slower over the years because of statistics and because, people are getting way more in depth into the numbers in the numbers game. So pitching changes, that's 5 or 6 minutes right there. And nowadays there's roughly, 5 or 6 pitchers that throw in a game sometimes. And so the pace of play, and I think that, as we've evolved in this country and technology has evolved, I think TikTok's a great example. I think it's 10 to 15 second clips,
Right.
of just nonstop action. And what you're getting in the NFL is not, hockey, soccer. The ball's always in play for the most part,
Right.
and it's easier to keep your attention on those games.
1965 saw the first ever first-year player draft. In the same year, the Colt 45s changed their name to the Astros. In 1966, the Milwaukee Braves moved to Atlanta, where they remain today. Also in 1966, the Major League Baseball Players Association was established. In 1967, the Cy Young Award was given to 2 players instead of 1 for the first time. The National League winner was San Francisco's Mike McCormick, and the American League winner was Boston's Jim Lombard. In 1968, the Athletics moved to Oakland, where they remain to this day. 1969 was another huge year for expansion. 4 new teams entered the league. The Kansas City Royals and the Seattle Pilots were added to the American League, while the San Diego Padres and the Montreal Expos were added to the National League. There were now 24 Major League Baseball teams, 12 in each league, prompting the introduction of the LCS, which was played for the first time in 1969. Previously, the World Series was played between the teams with the best record in each league. In 1970, after just 1 year in Seattle, the Pilots moved to Milwaukee and became the Brewers, where they remain to this day. In 1972, the Washington Senators moved to Texas and became the Rangers, where they remain to this day. In 1974, Catfish Hunter signed the first ever free agent contract in baseball history. He signed with the Yankees on a contract worth $3.25 million, the largest contract of all time at that point. In 1976, free agency as we know it was formally introduced to Major League Baseball. As a compromise for baseball's owners, the 6-year service time rule was also introduced this year. In 1977, Canada got its second team as the Toronto Blue Jays were added to the American League. Seattle also got a baseball team again, with the Seattle Mariners also entering the American League. Also in 1977, the NLCS MVP award was introduced, with the first winner being Dusty Baker of the Los Angeles Dodgers. In 1980, the Silver Slugger Award was introduced, being given to the 18 best offensive players at their positions. Also in 1980, Royals second baseman Frank White won the first ever ALCS MVP award. In 1983, the first Manager of the Year awards were given to Tommy Lasorda and Tony La Russa. In 1985, the first Home Run Derby was played as an All-Star Break festivity in Minnesota at the Metrodome. Dave Parker won the inaugural Derby. Major League Baseball got its inspiration for this event from a 1960s TV show by the same name. In 1993, the Colorado Rockies and the Florida Marlins were added to the National League, finally balancing the MLB at 14 teams per league. In 1994, the two Central divisions were added. The first version of the NL Central consisted of the Reds, Astros, Cardinals, Cubs, and Pirates. The first version of the AL Central included the Indians, Twins, Royals, White Sox, and Brewers. Because of this realignment, the division series was supposed to be introduced in 1994, but due to the strike, it made its debut in 1995. Also in 1994, Chan-Ho Park became the first Korean-born Major League Baseball player. 1998 marked the last year of the expansion era. The Arizona Diamondbacks were added to the National League, and the Tampa Bay Rays were added to the American League. Major League Baseball wanted both leagues to have an even number of teams, so the Brewers volunteered to move to the National League as a member of the NL Central. This brought the total up to 30 MLB teams, 16 in the National League and 14 in the American League. In 1999, the MLB Futures game was played for the first time. 2005 saw the most recent relocation, as the Montreal Expos moved to Washington, D.C. and became the Nationals. In 2012, interleague play was expanded. Each team would now play every team from one division in the opposite league. In the same year, a second wildcard team was added to the playoffs, which prompted the introduction of the wildcard game. In 2013, the Astros moved from the National League to the American League, entering the American League West as its fifth team, and finally evening out the leagues. Since 2013, each league has had 15 teams, and each division has had 5.
The fans just are so hesitant about, they're just such a conservative league. Are you worried that without rule changes or without some sort of major like shift, maybe like a pitch clock or something to speed up the game and get more actions, less strikeouts, less walks, we're going to potentially lose the younger generation from being fans of baseball?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's already started to happen. I mean, if you you look at your just pull up any Major League Baseball roster and see how many Americans are on that team or on these teams, it's not going on. It's not happening. We're getting the majority of these teams are filled up with folks from the Dominican Republic, from Venezuela, and you can see it.
Yeah.
We have an American, we have a Major League Baseball league that's in America, and it's filled with people from out of our country because of the interest. The interest level has dropped so much from kids in America. Yeah, so I am worried about it.
Could the prosperity of America's pastime become a thing of the past? Baseball has a problem. Young people aren't tuning in. Not even 1 in 12 calls baseball his or her favorite sport. So what can incoming Commissioner Rob Manfred do to turn things around? Today's digital generation of kids just can't stay focused on 9 innings of baseball. Hell, I can't even stay focused, and I'm 40. For answers on how the game can be improved, I talked to a bunch of children who can't even spell the word baseball. Tonight's game starts at 8 o'clock. That means it'll probably be over around 11:15, 11:30. Are you allowed to stay out that late on a school night?
11:30?
Yeah.
No.
Speaking of breaking the rules, Major League Baseball is also guilty. When the bases are unoccupied, the pitcher must deliver the ball within 12 seconds after he receives the ball. That never happens. That rule has not been enforced in outgoing Commissioner Bud Selig's tenure.
Too much waiting.
Too much sitting around
Yes.
and doing nothing?
Wait.
No surprise, the game's getting longer. Your average ball game clocked in at 3 hours and 8 minutes. Compare that to 1950 when the average ball game lasted only 2 hours and 22 minutes. So would taking baseball back to just 2.5 hours per game be enough to get the kids to watch? How long would you like to spend watching a baseball game?
45 minutes.
Do you ever go to a baseball game? Do you ever go to the stadium?
I was on vacation and I went to one. It was so boring that I fell asleep.
What would make baseball more fun for you to watch?
But home runs every time.
Robert is feeling the pain of MLB hitters. Teams only produce 0.86 home runs per game. Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire were two of 13 hitters who topped 40 home runs in 1998, the heart of the steroid-fueled era. Just one player, Nelson Cruz, hit 40 home runs this season. Everybody watch the game, okay? You all watching? All right, Isabella, how much fun are you having on a scale of 1 to 10? 1? Robert, how much fun are you having? Scale of 1 to 10? 3. A 3. Okay, now I'll turn off the TV.
Okay.
Okay, watch the blank screen. Isabella, how much fun are you having? Scale of 1 to 10?
2.
A little bit more fun than watching the baseball game, right?
Yeah.
What about you?
10.
A 10?
Baseball players aren't used to watching clocks, but that changes this season. Major League ballparks have installed timers for the commercial breaks between innings. They require players to resume the game as soon as those clocks hit 0. It's one of the small steps the league is taking to speed up the pace of play after average game times hit a record high in 2014. 3 hours and 8 minutes. It would be one thing if those 3-hour games were action-packed, but actually both hits and runs per game are down in recent years. So what's going on?
It's like watching Lord of the Rings, like 160 times in 6 months or something.
Every night you've got Lawrence of Arabia.
This is Grant. He watches baseball sometimes.
About 200 baseball games a year.
He says there's no one thing slowing down the pace of play, but part of it is that some of the players are just kind of dawdling.
The time between pitches has gone up.
Last season, pitchers took an average of 23 seconds between pitches. There's actually a rule on the books that the pitcher has to throw the ball within 12 seconds if the bases are unoccupied, but it hasn't been enforced. Just limiting pitchers to 20 seconds would cut around 15 minutes of game time. The off-season league started testing a pitch clock last year, 20 seconds without a pitch, and the umpire calls an automatic ball. That's something that may be coming to the majors next.
If they already have the clocks in place for between innings, I don't think they're going to be too delicate with the idea of a pitch clock.
It's not just pitchers that set the pace, though. Batters have their own bad habits. This year, they can be fined $500 if they don't keep 1 foot in the batter's box between pitches. But there's a pretty long list of exceptions. Still, some players are not happy about this.
I call that bullshit.
Batters are already at a disadvantage in this era of hard-throwing pitchers and stricter drug testing. It can be a strategic move to be able to slow things down.
When you force a hitter to do that, 70% you are out because you don't have no time to think.
But baseball purists say if you go back and watch classic games, before Velcro gloves, before players came on the field with a soundtrack, there was a lot less fiddling going on at the plate. Some other factors are a bit harder to tackle. There's been a shift in how teams deploy their pitchers, and it has to do with something called a loogie.
A lefty, one-out guy.
It's a pitcher brought in just to face a left-handed batter, and it's one of the ways that the bullpen has become more specialized, which means more pitchers are playing in each game than before.
You've got the loogie, maybe 2 loogies, 7th inning guy, 8th inning guy, maybe a couple of 8th inning guys. then ninth inning out.
More relief pitchers mean more game delays and more commercial breaks. But it's working for the teams, so this trend is probably here to stay. The new instant replay process may have also helped slow down the games last year. In theory, reviewing calls should eliminate arguments on the field, but it ended up that managers were stalling while their bench coach tried to decide whether to use the challenge. New rules this year should keep the managers in the dugout during challenges. The league hopes that by cutting out some of this dead time in the game, they'll make baseball more palatable for young people whose attention spans can't survive the 23 seconds between pitches.
Baseball knows that it has the oldest demographic of the four major North American sports, and it's not particularly close.
But here's the thing, football games are actually longer than baseball games, with more dead time and more commercials. And the kids love football. But it doesn't hurt to try. And there's one way that baseball could become more relevant rather than less in this era of constant digital noise.
I think baseball can survive as something of an oasis around that, where people come and say, we need at least one leisurely sport that we can go to and just relax. And if we miss an inning, we're not going to feel bad. We're going to go to the park and sit in the sun for the whole express purpose of the leisurely game with punctuated bursts of excitement.